بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So we're going to continue today with our series on Kitab al-Adhkār, the book of remembrance of Dhikr al-Imam al-Nawawi رضي الله عنه أرضاه Shaykh al-Islam al-Imam al-Nawawi. We've done 2 sessions so far, 2 introductions. I've been away, had my daughter's walima, then also there was a bereavement in my wife's family, so because of that I was not able to carry on. But inshallah ta'ala we're going to pick them back up again. So today we'll discuss the 3rd introduction, because in the introduction Imam al-Nawawi has on this book on Dhikr, Kitab al-Adhkār, he has a series of sections as part of the introduction. So we'll just count this as a 3rd introduction, where Al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala wa nafa'ana Allah bi'ulumihi wa barakatihi fi ad-darain, he states that there's an ijma', a unanimous agreement, no disagreement amongst the ulama, amongst the people of knowledge, that it's allowed to do dhikr in the heart and on the tongue for a person who's not in wudu, for a person who's sexually impure, needs to do ghusl, for a woman who's menstruating, and for a woman who's in postnatal bleeding after giving birth, which in normal times it's forbidden for these people, for example, to pray, and for the last 3 to read the Quran. But he says there's an agreement that it's allowed for those people in a state of minor or major impurity to do dhikr in the heart and to do dhikr on the tongue. For example, saying Subhanallah, Walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. So you have your tasbih, your sibha, and you have a daily word, dhikr from the Prophet, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, 100 times, for example. Saying La ilaha illallah 100 times, saying Alhamdulillah regularly, saying Allahu Akbar, Salah ala Rasulillah, your word of salawat, of Darood Sharif, all of these things, even if you're in a state of impurity, even major impurity, even a woman who's not praying, there's no disagreement that it's allowed, as Imam al-Nawawi radiyallahu anhu arda states, for all of these people, as well as making dua. What he then reminds us, which is a fiqh discussion, a legal discussion, he goes into a fair amount of detail on this, that what is categorically haram for a person who's in state of sexual impurity, a menstruating woman and a woman in postnatal bleeding, is to recite the Quran. Whether it's a small amount, part of an ayah of the Quran, whether it's a large amount, makes no difference. Although, to think without moving the tongue, but without pronouncing or moving the tongue, just to, in your mind, go over it without moving your tongue, he said it's allowed. Likewise, if you have a mushaf, a copy of the Quran in front of you, and you're looking at it without moving your tongue, it's allowed. It's allowed. He then mentions, and bearing in mind that Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, is Shafi'i of madhab, so usually the points will be based on the Shafi'i madhab, but there are a lot of similarities with the Hanafis. So for example, he mentions that it's allowed for a person who's in state of sexual impurity and a woman who's menstruating, when you suffer a problem, to say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And he mentions riding an animal. When you get into your car to drive, if you're in a state of major impurity, you're allowed to say Subhanalladhi sakhara lana hadha wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin. You're allowed to make a dua, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhab an-nar. And he mentioned these as examples because these are all ayat of the Quran, but then he highlights the point that that's provided you don't make intention of niyyah, or your intention is not tilawat al-Quran, that you recite on Quran, but rather you're doing it with the intention of dua. Then there's no harm in doing it. He then goes into fairly detailed fiqh discussions. We'll just pass over this because quite a lot of technical fiqh discussion that he mentions. So the key point being that he reminds us that although a person in major impurity, sexual impurity, menstruating woman, a woman in postnatal bleeding, they're not allowed to read the Quran. They're not allowed to read the Quran, and that's agreed across the four madhabs of Ahl Sunnah. But there's nobody who says they can't do zikr or make dua or read salawat. There's nobody who says that. So people should keep on doing these things even when they're not in a purified state. When going to sleep, for example, reading Ayat al-Kursi, reading the last 3 surahs of the Quran and so on. Even if a person is sexually impure, it's permitted to do that. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.